Unit 4. When, where, and how. Section 1. Listening Comprehension. 1. Listen to the following passages and then decide whether the following statements are true or false.
1. In late December, an advanced team of about 20 personnel from Japan's Air Self-Defense Force finally set foot in Kuwait and Qatar. Their work there is to prepare for the arrival of several hundred troops over the next few months to support reconstruction work in Iraq.
2. South Korea's economic ties with China, now its leading trading partner, are growing rapidly. As a budding rival to the United States for influence in Northeast Asia, China has assumed a new muscular diplomacy, most notably in the six-nation talks to resolve the North Korean crisis.
3. There must be a better way to respond to the opening up of new environments as the ice retreats. There is no need for a carve-up. No one can claim the Arctic as their God-given right, with the possible exception of the Inuit people, who lack the nationhood needed to stake a claim. And do we really have no better use for this near-pristine ecosystem than to plunge oil rigs down in the middle of it, especially when we know what climactic harm burning that oil will do?
4. China's $1.4 trillion economy, which has grown at twice the pace of India's during the past decade, could rival Japan's gross domestic product within the next 6 years.
5. India has more than its share of problems beyond shoddy roads and ports. This year, the economy is expected to grow about 8%, a rate that is catching investors' attention. But bureaucracy and profligate government borrowing may douse growth in the years ahead.
6. Earlier, Japanese ships were sent to the Indian Ocean to help U.S. action in Afghanistan, but only to provide logistical support. Then, Parliament had to pass a special law allowing humanitarian missions in Iraq, but on condition that the troops are sent to areas away from combat.
7. Both the Tories and the Liberal Democrats cling to the idea of purely tax-funded higher education. The former intend to save money by cutting student numbers. The latter claim that extra money can be painlessly extracted from people earning more than £100,000 a year.
8. There is a precedent at the other end of the world. Nearly 50 years ago, at the height of the Cold War, Russia, the U.S., and 10 other nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. They agreed to freeze their claims to the territory on the ice continent and to keep it demilitarized, nuclear-free zone devoted to science. A decade ago, a supplementary agreement came into force banning any mineral exploitation on the continent. Has the world gone so far backwards since then that we cannot agree to something similar for the Arctic?
9. The good news for Europe is that there are a number of local companies that are as innovative as any. For instance, Augusta Westland, a helicopter maker, is moving into what it dubs its third era of sustainable growth, following periods when it was classed as a pioneer and later as a market leader. The company has launched 2 big research-based projects to achieve this.
10. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, British policymakers have been worrying that universities don't work better with businesses. In 1919, the economist Alfred Marshall bemoaned the fact that the fruits of revolutionary discoveries in science were reaped by businesses in Germany, where industry and science have been in close touch. 2. Choose the answer that best fits the meaning of the statement you have heard.
1. Resistance forces have assassinated a member of the governing council, the top Iraqi body appointed by the Americans, along with the deputy mayor of Baghdad, several judges, a top oil official, and several senior policemen.
2. In a recent report, the European Commission said that European countries spend just 1.1% of their gross domestic product on higher education, compared with 2.3% in the United States, with the difference coming from private financing, including tuition.
3. Police are investigating whether 4 students deported from Pakistan and now detained in Jakarta for suspected terrorism links were involved in funding the bombing of the Marriott Hotel in Jakarta in August, which killed 12 people.
4. In the United States, the federal budget is drifting into a future of unprecedented tax increases, huge deficits, or both. This is no secret because the great driving force of change is the impending retirement of 77 million baby boomers and their heavy claims on federal retirement programs.
5. Because of the market's complexity, media accounts often suggest that oil markets move without a clear connection to economic fundamentals, and that irrational fears or the actions of shadowy governments drive price and product availability. Although consumers' fears and suppliers' political decisions surely matter, their effects can be understood within a fairly traditional market framework. 2 main processes determine oil prices: the forces of supply and demand, and constraints on those forces created by political risk and cartel behavior.
6. The American beef industry is facing a long road to recovering the world's trust. McDonald's issued a press release about its long-standing policy against using unhealthy cattle, like the one implicated in last month's recall. One of the biggest steps in U.S. Secretary of Agriculture took last week was to ban the sale of meat from these animals.
7. In November, the American Heart Association said that it's better to eat fish than to avoid it, especially since there is still plenty of seafood like cod, farmed tilapia, and shellfish that remain pure. And while the fish richest in omega-3s often have the highest levels of contaminants, they are still safe, to a point. There's little solid evidence that low levels of contaminants like mercury in fish can harm healthy adults.
8. Because soot promotes the melting of snow and ice, it may exacerbate the problem of rising seas. The good news is that reducing the amount of soot in the air by installing exhaust filters on diesel trucks and buses and better managing forest fires is probably easier than getting Americans to give up SUVs. Fires are the source of about half the world's soot.
9. Federal prosecutors have begun a wide-ranging effort to curb the growing popularity of online gambling in the United States by quietly threatening legal action against American companies that do business with internet casinos and sports betting operations based outside the country.
10. Several big media operations, including Infinity Broadcasting, Clear Channel, and the Discovery Networks, stopped running advertisements for offshore internet casinos last autumn in light of the threat of further scrutiny that might lead to prosecution.
Section 2. Reading. Monkey's Best Friend. An accouchement. Prompt. This article reports recent findings of scientists through their study of the social behaviors of animals in the wild. It is interesting in several aspects. First, it offers close-up observations of wild animals, which are beyond our sphere of life and naturally raise our curiosity. Second, the discovery seems to shed new light on the role of socializing in human society. Last, in describing the animal behavior, the author has made extensive use of the circumstantial elements, when, where, and how, which provide an anchorage for the story she is telling. Prudy is one of the most popular baboons in her group. When her fellow monkeys pass by, they raise their tails in deference. When her fur grows dusty, there's always a volunteer to give it a good grooming. For 8 years, she's even had that rare thing in the baboon world, a steady male companion. Rocky would carry her children on his back and accompany her on foraging expeditions through the savannah at the foot of Kenya's Mount Kilimanjaro. Even though Rocky left the group in August, Prudy still has female friends and relatives she can count on. In 23 years, she's given birth to 11 kids, of which 8 have survived. Viva, a female from a nearby group, is a social pariah. When she approaches her fellow baboons, they often lunge at her threateningly or raise their eyebrows, flashing the pale pigment of their eyelids to scare her off. She's also been less fortunate in childbirth. In 18 years, she delivered 8 children, but only 4 have survived. One of the biggest cliches in psychology is that in times of crisis, women turn to friends while men either withdraw or curse and gesticulate. The male response, a manifestation of the fight or flight survival instinct, has been rigorously studied. A paper published last week in the journal Science now sheds some light on the female response. Scientists studying baboon populations have found that the mothers who develop the most elaborate social networks tend to raise children with lower mortality rates. The findings suggest that a woman's social network is more than just a diversion. It's basic to the survival of the species. The study focused on 108 female baboons in Kenya's Amboseli Basin, who have been observed continually from 1984 to 1999. A group of scientists studied the baboons in their natural habitat, living in tents and following them on foot and by car from sunrise to sundown. They were struck in general by how much time female baboons spend socializing, about 10% of their day. It's a very expensive activity, says one researcher. Baboons need all the time and energy they can muster to forage for food, care for their offspring, and guard against predators. The phenomenon begs the question of why evolution constructed an organism that's so sensitive to social contact, says the scientist. Ultimately, it has to be because it affects Darwinian fitness. It affects how well you propagate your lineage. Knowing that socializing plays a role in the evolution of a species is one thing, but exactly how it works remains a mystery. The scientists have several guesses. Proximity to fellow baboons is known to discourage predators. especially if a female teams up with a male. And because most of baboons' socializing involve grooming, picking dirt or insects out of each other's fur, it may promote better health. A lonely baboon will self-groom, but there are always those hard-to-reach areas, like the back and ears. The leading theory, though, is that socialization relieves stress. Data gathered on baboons in captivity have shown that grooming reduces the animal's heart rate and promotes the release of endorphins. Human studies have also linked social ties and good health. Researchers have found a correlation between the social network of an expectant mother and the birth weight of her baby. The more support a woman receives, the more healthy her pregnancy is. Friends and family will pitch in with everything from helpful advice to transportation and money for prenatal visits. But the benefits of friendship go far beyond material support. The sociologists who think about relationships use the term social capital, and they use it in the sense of, okay, how many people in an emergency can you borrow money from or have watch your kids? How many people would you trust with keys to your house? That's a collective measure of stability, and there's an enormous literature that shows every aspect of health gets better as a result of more social capital. Scientists may need more time to nail down exactly how socializing confers an evolutionary advantage. In the meantime, let's just assume that meeting friends for a drink is a biological necessity.